It's the SDG Podcast. Before we get started, you can check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com/podcast or find us on all the social medias, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Solution Design Group. All right, welcome back. We got another podcast going. Today we're going to do one called What Do We Do? And talk about data engineering and data science, not necessarily in that order. So joining us today, we've got data science Cam Marcott. Say hello to the people at home just listening. And we have data engineer Bennett.
Hello.
All the way from some high-rise office building penthouse. Looks great. And then Peter Lawrence joining us, one of our regulars in front of us. And of course, I'm Kyle Bacher. And so my first question is, what is data science?
So I'd say data science is helping somebody take their data and do something useful with it. And that could be like an insight, like understanding their customer better, or it could be making a prediction about something, like what will a market look like in the future or demand look like, or it could be like prescribing something to help, like if we'll probably be referencing a case study throughout, like if you have a student, what should they study next to increase their chance of success?
And Bennett, what does it mean to be a data engineer?
I think it's a little bit of the precursor to what Cam might be doing with data science. So it's getting data into a usable format, not necessarily deriving anything from it, but getting it to a point where it can be used from different locations, sources, apps, whatnot, and putting it together, one or semi-centralized location, and turn it over to awesome people like Cam.
So you take raw data, wherever it comes from, and you put it into a form that's queryable, usable, explorable, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it might change how it looks from A to B per se, and it might be aggregated. It might be enriched with certain data sets that are external to that original source, variations of tools and places and how data can go from A to B, how fast you need it to go. Is it streaming? Is it a monthly process, or is it a year-end process, to kind of close out certain accounts or make sure things tie together? But getting data to that usable point where you can start to take a look at it and start to derive things from it, maybe get decisions that are broader, but Cam can go into that a whole lot better than I can. So
yeah, I can just say that for what my job typically is, it's impossible to do it successfully, like do it well, until Bennett's side has done their job, where it's like the output's only as strong as the input.
So Bennett, you're going to go in and set up if they need a data lake or however that needs to be so that the organization can get to it, doing some data hygiene, maybe restructuring databases, things like that. During that process, do you need to really understand their data well?
Yeah, that's one of the things that's really interesting. Typically there's a SME or subject matter expert that's tied to certain applications or sets of things that happen within a business. Part of my job is to get to know them well enough and understand how things flow between A to B. Does this really mean this thing? Is this useful? No, we never use that column. that happens a lot more than you think.
We've only been tracking it for 40 years.
Yeah, exactly. So, Joe over in accounting sends me a spreadsheet every month. I have no idea where it comes from or how it gets there. Oh, maybe we could automate that kind of thing. Let's pull it in. Why are we doing that? I don't know. We've just always done it that way. So some of it is, maybe working a little bit of a business analyst, but more on the technical side. Why do we have this? Why is it going here? And then pulling that data in, automating some of those things. And do we care about this thing or that thing? Can this be deleted? Do we need it? Does an individual like Cam need it in an aggregated format? Is this clean data? Because, garbage in, garbage out kind of thing. Like Cam said, if he's starting with garbage, you can't expect a whole lot more coming out the other end. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. So it sounds like that's stuff that you really need to get right before Cam can do his data science stuff and science the hell out of it.
It doesn't need to be perfect. There's often a conversation that goes back and forth where like the data seems mostly right, and then maybe like I've been in a situation where it's like there's this one value and it's like weird, like it seems useful before January or something, and then it goes off the rails, and then you bug Bennett's team, and then Bennett talks to the business person, and the Bennett business person's like, oh yeah, like we just started tracking different data but loaded it into the same column. But it could be like a conversation where like sometimes I'll notice something's weird and point it out to Bennett. Like it doesn't need to be perfect, but it needs to be in place enough to have a conversation back and forth.
Well, and I assume part of your job is finding out like, hey, why does this column go off the rails in January? Why did it? We had all this stuff. It was showing us the magic answer, and then something went off the rails, and you have to work your way back to it, right?
Yeah, and sometimes it can be like they track something different, and sometimes it can be like something interesting happened, and it's something you're teaching the business something rather than...
That was when we added Canada. Oh, you guys added Canada. That would have been cool to know.
What's the postal code? You mean zip code? No, I mean postal code. So how much sleuthing, how much of a, Sherlock Holmes do you need to be, Bennett, when you go in and try to find that one Access database that's running on a server in the CEO's closet?
A lot of the times I run into this thing called shadow IT or shadow reporting.
Yeah.
There have been instances of, servers running under somebody's desk. You just have to start asking questions. And as a consultant, you can ask a lot of interesting questions because like, hey, I'm new here. I'd like to learn more about this thing. And sometimes people are willing to share, sometimes they're not. You got to, kind of dig around a little bit more. But a lot of times it's like, yeah, I've been doing this thing for I don't know how long. If you can automate it, take that off my plate. That would be a positive value add. Being able to talk to people, going around, finding things, understanding, if it's not just spoon fed to you, which it often is not, you do have to go do a little bit of digging and meeting with people and understanding, is this a sensitive topic? Is this a sensitive data set? Is there PII? Is there you get into all that kind of thing, and
right.
Who's able to act? You kind of start to jump into this governance thing too, where it's you're not allowed to see social security numbers, so we can't give you access to it, but we need you to do this so you can get it to this other spot. So it's like this rock and a hard place issue, and you run into some things like that. But yeah, you do. Human interaction has to happen in order to find these things. It's very rare that it's just spoon fed. Here's everything you need. And that's kind of what my job is in a sense, if you will, to try to get everything in a single spot. So data science can go, yeah, we have everything we need. Let's rock and roll. Let's get, and in sometimes there's decision points can be made on a per data basis, but I think if I'm understanding correctly, Cam's job would be more like, hey, we're seeing this trend, we should pay attention to it, make these decisions, we need to go A, B, or C on this because of these trends. Let's do that. Data can also, we can automate things to the point of nobody's in this building anymore. We should shut the lights off and save power or something like, as simple as that.
Yeah.
But
so it sounds like Bennett, that you have a lot of like lead-in work to do just to get a data set, and so that Cam can do his thing. How much overlap is there between the two of you?
I was just going to ask that. Like, do you guys have to work together on this part of it, or?
I would say, yeah. There's a lot of back and forth, like he alluded to earlier.
Yeah, because it's his output winds up being my input, so there's like conversation to make sure that the Lego pieces fit together, like what's realistic. And
Cam, do you ever find yourself asking for data that doesn't exist but you think has to exist somewhere? We just need to get it to this spot and you'll just ask Bennett to go sleuth that out, that kind of thing?
I'm more gentle with how other things. I'll like ask him if it exists. Not like it would be like, this has to exist.
This must exist. They must have an address somewhere for their business.
Do you often discover data that they're gathering? They might not know what to do with it, but you look at it and you recognize its importance, and then you're able to provide additional value that way. Does that happen too often?
It's usually more the other way. People tend to be hoarders with their data. So people are like, we've been tracking, I don't know, like we've been asking our customers how many times they clip their fingernails a day for my auto business. And it's like, But yeah, so they'll often give you like hundreds of thousands of columns or something, and more often your value is in like figuring out what's important or doing some kind of like, this is what you care about. You have 100,000 things. Let's identify the 6 that matter, the 8 that matter. And sometimes like that will surprise something. But the value is more in providing focus, I would say, than discovering things that aren't there.
Do they ever tell you to find a correlation that, look, we feel like there's a correlation here. Can you find it for us? And you do or don't? Like,
yeah. I've been told that before, and we've like found correlations before. This is an interesting one. This was an old job before I was at SDG, but I was at a team at a bank. During the pandemic, the Federal Reserve System was coming to banks, and they always ask them to model things, but very aggressive because they wanted information with how they were going to provide stimulus. The Federal Reserve System, they were asking my team, how do you think your deposits are going to look? Because it'll affect how we make Fed balance sheet decisions. And we looked into it and we told them, like, actually, our deposits follow the balance sheet decision, not the other way around. So whatever you do, it will have a direct impact on us.
Interesting.
Like, you shouldn't make decisions based on us. Whatever you do, our balance sheet will follow.
That'll cause it to happen and not make it happen.
Yeah, and our the like superiors who actually talked to the Fed, they were a little bit nervous about that answer because there's kind of the Fed says jump, banks say how high relationship. But they actually went and they told the Fed, like, we think that whatever you do, that you're the driving force, and the Fed agreed. They were like, okay, and used that in their decisioning.
Nice.
Or what we said, not just us, but they ask every single bank in the country.
Obviously.
Yeah.
So obviously you're, well, I'm sure, Cam, you're just writing algorithms like in a hallway while you're mopping. And I don't know how it works. And
I'm not even sure what you're describing there, Kyle.
Choose your weapon. What are your weapons of choice? What do you use to do what you do?
So
don't say mop and don't say hallway.
No, it's more like a square-shaped room and chalk.
Bennett, I know you know Python.
Yeah, but my weapons of choice, Python is my strongest programming language, and it's what a lot of the data science community gravitates to. And then, so if you want to model something, and say you have like some metric you want to model, and you have data in place, which both of those take time to get. Bennett's team has to get the data in place, and it takes some finding focus with the business to figure out what you should actually be predicting. But if you know both of those, then you want to find some algorithm that takes the data and provides you a good approximation of your output, or predicts it in a good way. My tendency is to start at the simplest possible thing. So I might like say at the beginning, even like, can I just take the average of the data or something? Does that give me what I want? No. Can I do like just a linear model, make it a line? Can I do like an XGBoost thing? Does that work well? It's okay. Can I do a neural network? It's still only okay. Okay, back off and stay at the simplest thing that works. I tend to escalate the complexity and then
not go to the most complex thing possible and then work backwards to the simpler, just in case something simple made it go faster.
No, I'm more of an Occam's razor kind of guy. Like, pick if two things have the same performance, the simpler one is what you should do.
Well, and it's more supportable, right? Like in the long run, you're going to be able to make changes and affect outcomes a lot easier with a simpler solution than...
Probably be more performant because when you're doing machine learning, nobody really cares about predicting the data that you've already observed. That's in the past. We care about how the model's going to do next month.
Right.
And the world is more likely follow some simple relationship, like these numbers go up together, is like those things tend to describe the world better than like some big neural network or something.
400 random points put together will equal this number going up somehow.
So, Ben, I know there's a lot of database tools out there in the cloud and not in the cloud, and there's a lot of programming Python being the big one, I think, because it does everything. Where do you prefer to do your stuff? In AWS? Are you in Azure? Does it matter? Is there a type of database?
So I would say there's step back. I like Cam's motto, keeping it as simplistic as possible, and that's kind of the same thing as far as the number of tools and whatnot. But yeah, Python is my, I would say, quote, favorite. But if you can do Python and you're good with SQL, writing SQL, with data, you can pretty much do almost anything in whatever flavor. So whatever, you have different categories of databases like relational, NoSQL, there's Graph, there's a few more out there. But if you can do or understand SQL, I think you can fly a lot of airplanes in the data world. As far as some of the cloud stuff, my analogy is they're all tractors, but Case and John Deere are painted different colors, might have slightly different knobs and levers, but they both pull the plow down the field. So it just depends on what your favorite color is and where you like your levers and knobs to be positioned. So personally, I've used AWS a little bit more than Azure. So and then how do you want to render some of that out as far as visuals? Some people just want reports. They don't necessarily want to go all the way to forecasting, or maybe they want both. So the data's got to be in a usable state too for other use cases as well. Maybe data needs to be available for somebody to pull it on a front end website. So you got to be able to support rapid fire API requests. Sometimes you need to have it stored in a database that like massive parallel processing capabilities. So you can crunch numbers super fast. You're not really concerned about individual records, or maybe it's that NoSQL where it's more of like a valet service where here's my ID, I can go get my data, I don't really care about the other cars in the parking lot, kind of a thing. So yeah, whatever's the most simplistic thing as far as getting data A to B in the best way, cheapest way possible. Items that Cam was talking about was, here's 100,000 columns, and he's got to figure out which top 10 or top 5 are important. So I'll go back to the tractor farm analogy. My job is to go out into the field, grab all the hay, bring it on in, and then he's got to sort through it all to find those needles. But I got to figure out how to get it all back to the barn in a nice, neat, orderly format. How do I stack those bales? Do they need to be in the shed? Can they be out? Does it matter? Do we have to get some into some kind of process immediately? Certain crops need to get dried, others don't, and you can process them later. So certain things need quicker actions. So timelines, maybe we can just drop a file off, in blob storage or on an FTP server somewhere, and it's good to go. Maybe we need to process it immediately because things depend on it. People's lives are depending on some of this data. It all kind of comes down to that. But in general, I think if you can write SQL queries and you can do Python, you can, like I said, fly a lot of airplanes in the data world.
Or drive a lot of tractors, right?
Or drive a lot of tractors, yeah.
I mean, let's stay with the one analogy.
Sure.
I'm gonna have trouble going farm and airports, and pretty soon we'll be I don't know what, but
I'll be flying one of those crop dusting drones.
Yeah, I suppose crop dusting comes into farming, doesn't it? Maybe that's the crossover that we're talking about.
My experience with the data world has been to build some kind of a dashboard, a UI, and I'd always ask just directly, because I'm not really a data guy. I'm not. I don't go that deep into it, but it was what do you want on the dashboard? And sometimes they could tell me. Like we want this KPI there. We want it to be red if something bad, is below this number and things like that. So I, played with some Legos and put some things together like that. But it didn't seem like they had a lot of insight into their own data. So do you find going in that their, level of maturity with data is kind of on the low end, and that's why they need you to come in and help them make sense of it all?
Depends on the business. And some, like working at a bank, like everybody's a little bit quantitative and everything's in the unit of dollars. So like people are good at having a number attached. But at the other end, there's a friend of mine who worked as a data scientist for NGO organizations providing aid in foreign countries, and the people who are in charge and work in those organizations are not as quantitative. So he had to do a lot of arm twisting to be like, okay, so how do you measure that providing books to children as having the intended outcome. And they're like, oh, it's just like when you see the looks in their eyes, you know. And he was like a hard quantitative guy, and he's like, can we take retinal photos and quantify the looks in their eyes? I'm like,
there you go. Yeah, how big? You just need to measure their smile, how big it is. And
yeah, but it really depends on who you're working with. If they have a numeric metric tied to what they're trying to achieve, or if maybe it's like some vague metric, like we don't want to waste our customers' time or something, then you can start taking the person's value and finding a way you can quantify their value. Like, okay, seconds they spent versus like return on time investment. There's some numeric value we can model based on this person's, like their business's values.
Al, did you freeze?
No, I'm just saying.
You look frozen. Are you just trying to take it in?
Just absorbing it all. So when you create data insights for your customer, this is more than just charts and graphs and pretty pictures. There's functional aspects of this. There's automation behind it and things like that that you have to build. Is that a correct statement? You guys see where I'm going with that? Yeah. Like fraud detection is one thing, or the NSA listening to our conversations, listening for keywords like Peter Lawrence.
They're just tracking our podcasts for those important names and numbers.
Yeah, there's some automation going on. I know, like you said, getting into like machine learning and some quick responses and whatnot. If you have an API call and somebody needs an answer and you've set something up, you can run that model, get a quick prediction, directionally correct. Maybe it's not super specifically, geared to their one use case, but maybe it's directionally correct and can give enough insight and value to push forward to the next step. But that's some of the data engineering stuff. There's pipelines you can set up. There's how do you, like I said before, do you need a real quick, fast response from a customer exposed website? Or do you, at the end of the month, you can press a button, calculate everything in a batch because we've closed out the month now, and that's the speed at which you need it. So automation can play a good part in that, especially as you move closer and closer to real-time things. But if you're backing off from that, maybe you don't need as much automation. Maybe I would love there to be more automation, but in some instances, maybe that's not the best answer. So give and take a little bit. It depends on where customers at on their iteration of making things better, adding value. So but kind of back to that previous question was, does everybody have everything figured out? Not necessarily, but it's like, where are they on this iteration of starting out to they have everything running perfect? Where are they at on that scale? And you can jump in and add value to that. So if they're just starting out, yeah, there's some groundwork. Maybe we need to paint some pictures, throw something on the wall. If it sticks, cool. If it's not, at least we have something to point at and say, I want this thing changed this way because of. And so we can move forward on that value scale. And I think that's where myself and Cam jump in and say, all right, here's where we're at. Here's where we need to go. How do we get there? And we can help push that lever or that needle to add value.
I guess that kind of brings me to sort of back to, I don't know where we were in the conversation, but, Cam, you talked about businesses sometimes know what they want. Businesses sometimes don't know what they want, but they kind of know what they want.
Yeah, they'll often know what they want, but if you're training a model, it's like some mathematical process, so they might not have quantified what they want. They probably know what they want, or at least have a good idea of it, but they might not.
They bring you in to figure out, like, hey, we need to answer this question. How do we improve test scores? How do we improve, shopping carts performance or something like that, right?
Yeah, they'll have a question they want answered. Sometimes it won't even be a question. Sometimes it'll be like a complaint, like this really annoys me, or like it keeps me up at night when, and then like you can translate.
Because they don't know the answer. It keeps them up at night because they're not sure of, like, I think I should be able to answer this question, but I can't sitting in my chair right now.
Yeah, just like people were like, it's like, I know I'm doing this wrong and it bugs me. And it's like, let's try to do it less wrong. Ideally correctly, but
right.
failing that.
But less wrong would be better than where we are today, right?
Yeah.
Are you finding that some of these new AI tools are helping you at all to do this kind of work, or is that something that it just can't really do?
It depends what you're trying to do. Like if you're trying to model something, like ChatGPT is a model, but it's modeling what word should come next in a sentence and doing that over and over again. It's like not a model to predict what the stock market's going to do next month. So like you should use the right tool for the right job. And if you want to use words, or if you're doing something with words, ChatGPT is good. But if you're trying to model your own data, you're probably better off training a specific model than using
ChatGPT is telling me to buy Blockbuster Video. Maybe hold off on it.
I need to call
or maybe put your own thought into it.
You get my broker on the phone quick. Yeah.
But it is, even if it's not the correct model for the job, it does fill a role as like a very good user interface.
Mm-hmm.
Where you can take a AI system, they call it like building an agent, and I can make an agent to give you stock advice, and I can specifically instruct it when Peter or when anybody asks you for stock advice, you don't make something up. You call this endpoint for a model that I've trained to do that.
Oh, okay.
I can order my chatbot agent to do that. So then what I've done is I have my good model for stock buying, and I'm using the chatbot as a user interface.
To put the English language onto the questions and the interaction.
Yeah, like, and it's a very good, cool user interface, user experience tool.
Now, is it? I heard that it's the biggest thing is going to be agents. Kind of the next step for AI beyond like your Chat GPTs and all that is building agents. And I've seen in Copilot Studio and Azure how you can spin up agents pretty quickly. Is that something that anybody should be doing, or is that something that, yeah, you can use some of these tools to spin up an agent to look at something, but you probably need some help?
You should probably have some help, because at least put some thought into it, if not help. Because you can, even if it's democratized, get yourself into a pickle with something. SharePoint, let's say you have all of your HR data on SharePoint, and personal data is supposed to be behind a login. I give my agent access to everything for a good user experience. So I can't click on Kyle Backer's HR data, which is correct, but maybe I can ask my friendly agent like information about Kyle Backer, and it will tell me because I've removed the data security when I built it. Like,
well, that's one of the problems was it didn't respect the built-in security trimming. So it could go out and fetch something and show you something that you really shouldn't be seeing. And I think that's better now. I haven't tried it late, and I have access to everything, so I have to go with my test account, which is just Bennett's, because he doesn't have access to anything. And
you wouldn't believe how many times he calls.
No, but it's you look at that and go, okay, I don't want to give it full boat access to everything. I wanted to give it more specific access, or just point it to sources that are okay, instead of having a very broad access to everything and hope for the best. So I think security is a big concern. I think that, when you're doing your data hygiene, I think that should be a piece of it, where it's like, is this, what are the retention policies on this? Is this any kind of formal document? And that shouldn't really be part of this system. We actually need to move this somewhere else. Do you find that kind of stuff? Does it shake you to your core sometimes when you see what people are storing, what they have access to?
It's happened in the past, for sure. Or people having access to things, not even realizing they have access to things. But there's, as data moves, like I said before, I'm in the tractor getting all the hay to bring it into the barn. Some of that is interesting cropland, or different plants that, certain people are allergic to, or certain things, certain animals, you're going to kill them off unknowingly, sticking with the farm analogy. So
there's going to be some weeds in the hay.
Yeah, you got to figure that out. And so like data governance and security is important. Like, who owns it? It's not mine. It's coming and going from applications. I'm just the shuttle that's providing the route from A to B. I don't own the data. I don't want to own the data. I definitely want to work with the data owner, or in other terms like data steward. who's in charge of this? And there's a lot of the times a technical person, a lot of times a business person, who owns the application. Well, it may not be a technical person. It might be a business person, and you have to explain to them, hey, we're going to be, the business wants to move this data from A to B, so we can do these other things that are important to the business and add value, but we need to move it over there to be able to do these things, and they'll have concerns. And rightfully so in many cases about, this thing, our definition of this thing is not well known. And if we use it incorrectly, there's actually, laws against using it this way in our marketing stuff because of the type of company we are or the how we do things, or we're a legal firm and you can't mix and match that stuff, or there's laws in places too about certain things where you can and cannot do. And by the way, there's like California has some, and what is the GDR something
there's
over
a lot,
in Europe.
There's a lot of acronyms surrounding
it's like,
data, right?
If somebody wants to call your business up and say, hey, remove all of my data, you still have to be able to do that too. So going back to the simplicity aspect of it, it's like the more simple you can make it, the better. So what if somebody calls up and says, hey, I want my data removed, but we have, stored off aggregated data. Do we need to remove them from that aggregation or not and recalculate all those aggregations? Or is that fine? And, there's all these different pieces to that puzzle. So
there's some complex rules around.
Yeah.
What data you can use, and once you've used it, if you've anonymized it enough, does it matter that it gets removed later on or something like that, right? And those are what usually I term lawyer questions, because they can answer it for the company and I cannot, because I can technically do either or both, right? But
in many instances, I have found myself in meeting with lawyers saying, yeah, we can share this data point. No, we can't. And vice versa. And it's like, okay, well, I can make it happen. You just, right. I need to know what I can or should do versus what I can't or illegal to do. And hopefully I can get enough of those. Again, I can go get enough of hay out of the field to bring over to Cam. Here's what I got. I hope this works. Let me know if there's, if you think there's other things we're missing or things we don't have that are necessary. Cool, we can go get those. But this should be the majority of the harvest. Here you go. Let's make something happen.
Yeah, and then it's like good to flag, because sometimes the illegal data will get passed along, and sometimes you want it to get passed along, or you might, like if you have like data for like if someone's a protected class or not, you don't want to use that in your model. You don't want to have your model be like, this person has a disability, so treat them differently. But you might want to, after you've trained your model, ask, like, is my model treating people with disabilities differently? And
right.
You would need some form of that data to answer that question. So then that's like a tricky thing where it's like, I want it, but is it legal to have it?
And then it gets complicated. And as a programmer, like, I know I'm not using that in my model. I know I'm just using that for outcome testing and deciding if my model is unfairly discriminating. And I need to know if a party's being discriminated against to know, like, I need to have more information to know that, right?
But the data governance group might come along and say, you're not supposed to use it. Why are you passing this along? And then you get into this big, long discussion and it goes up the chain a little bit maybe. And, then there's, I won't call it bad, but it's like just turmoil that you have to deal with, or interaction between business, legal, and throughout this whole process. Those are just interesting scenarios you might find yourself in.
Well, because nobody wants to break the law.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Nobody wants to have a visit from the FBI and ask questions about your code or about something that you've done. At least I don't. I've never ever, knock on wood, and if they're listening, I still haven't been visited. Thank you. But you're trying very hard not to do something that will get you into trouble, that will cause your effort to be thrown away, right? Like, oh, well, you just did that and we can't use that, so throw it all away and start over. And that's bad, right? So, all right.
So who does the job of turning business data into business intelligence? Is it either of you?
So BI, business intelligence?
Yeah.
That might be somewhere slightly in the middle / another role.
Yeah.
So there's like report builders, or, if you're going to use Power BI or Tableau or something like that. Again, that's another, from my perspective, data engineer world. You're bringing data in, and it needs to be stored in in a location, and there can be multiple use cases for that data. One might be reports, one might be automation, one might be probably is data science. There's a bunch of different or maybe responsive enough to have API coming and going from an external facing website. There's a bunch of different, and so it's got to be in a format or a structure that can be used by all of those, or maybe multiple structures depending on, we really need this thing to work well over here. So maybe, heaven forbid, we duplicate the data kind of in a weird way, or maybe it's like a view on top of a database that displays it differently or aggregates it differently. But maybe there's multiple, places for people to come pick that up in different formats or structures that they want to. Report builders or business intelligence, like you were talking about a dashboard. Maybe there's a company-wide KPI dashboard. But maybe we need to be able to click on something and drill down to the next layer. Or maybe it's here's a map and you need to click on a particular state or province, if we're adding Canada, and zoom in and get that data. And then maybe even more, like to a local county or a city or something. Do you need to go to that level or not? Maybe that's how it needs to go. But there's definitely certain skill sets that have that report building more so than I would say data engineering or data science. But it's somewhere in the middle, and there's kind of this other
kind of a DBA role that's kind of doing sort of that database maintenance and slogging through things.
Like a data analytics type role.
Yeah,
I think.
Okay.
Which could be another podcast because we do have data analytics specific people at SDG.
Yeah.
What we do is coming soon.
Yeah, but often, there'll be for my role, some of the analytics type stuff, especially at the beginning of a project where you're more hands-on with the business, trying to figure out, can we quantify your KPIs and things like that. But then if you're building some machine learning thing, typically that's not feeding something to a business line that they look at periodically. There might be an aggregated sense, but usually it's more something running that's making decisions like as they come in real time.
So Cam, are you looking at sort of which version of the database you've got in your modeling? Like if you need to provide real-time feedback to a user who's doing something interactive on a website, is that different than if you need to, provide the sale items for the catalog next week or something like that?
Yeah, those are different because there's like speed requirements if it's something on a website, and then it's also like the way you're running things. If it's like batch data where you're taking a bunch in, and like if you're training a model, you can have a massive amount of data and you're learning from it, or you're doing the catalog thing, maybe you have like a month's worth of data and you're aggregating it. But if you're trying to decide what ad to show you next on YouTube, you have 10 lines of JSON file worth of data coming in or something.
Right.
You're making one prediction. You're not making a whole month's worth of predictions.
Okay. And so you're training your model differently based on...
Or you train it on the big data. And
okay. You just use it differently.
Then you deploy it to run on and those can be different needs from the data team, where it's like, I want all the historic data in some parallel Spark thing so I can run through lots of it at once. And I want the streaming data just fast, whatever.
Just to tell, you have the same, where we're at.
Yeah, like low latency.
Yeah. You have the same experience that Peter and I have, where you do all the building and everything and you get done and you wonder, did it go well? Did they use it? Was it of value? Do you experience the same thing, gentlemen?
Sometimes I get to stick around for a little while. There's an interest, compared to, I don't want to say regular programming because that's not necessarily true, but if you're building an app, right? You're building the application, you're building the code. The code itself is the asset per se, which can be redeployed in the next 30 seconds, the next version of it, and the old one just goes away. Whereas data is a different animal. It's something that sticks around. So if I want to add a new column to a table, simple as that, every row that's in that table now has a blank or null or whatever value for that. So it's a durable asset that sticks around. That is the asset, not necessarily your code that modifies it or your select statement. It's not the code that's the asset, it's the data. So the data is going to be around for quite a while, most likely. It's going to be used in different ways. And other people can use it for other use cases. So whether you're building out that KPI report, you're building out a model, whether you're, whatever, that it's going to stick around for a while. So typically it takes a little bit of TLC, keep it up and running, make sure it's, headed on the right course for a while. And maybe there's another project, but tangentially, you're still kind of paying attention to that thing. And that functionality that the business has, you can kind of see the functionality from afar, even after you've left an organization or whatnot and moved on to the next project. It kind of makes you feel good, like that thing's still there. And in some cases, we've had kind of a little bit of a data revolution in the last, 5-10 years. There's more things, but some of those older things that are there, it's like this thing's been here for 20-25 years and it's still running, it's still doing great. Somebody set that thing up really well, and kudos to them for doing so.
That same thing can be true with the data science end, but it causes a little bit more worry because like the world changes. So if I train some model to make some predictions and the world changes, it might start being wrong. So I always I'll set things up to retrain periodically on a pipeline, but then when I leave, I'll warn people this is automated and running, but you need to watch it because there's no guarantee it'll still work well a year from now just because the world changes. Not the system's fault. And then the worry is oh no, what if they just left it on and it's broken?
It's just giving the wrong prediction over and over and over, and they still use it to this day.
It's if your website's broken, people notice and they complain. If your model's broken, do a bad job under the radar for quite a long time before somebody complains or turns it off.
But so you do have that handoff, that turnover and the explanation, the training of the support people to say, look, you're going to have, it's not a computer that's just going to run in the corner forever. You're going to have to train it.
It's called model monitoring is a word they use. And it's I'll set something up to automatically generate a monitoring report at the end of every week to tell you how the model's doing. And it's how do you want that? Do you want it emailed to you? No, I don't need that. Okay, it's saved in this Azure folder tied to the model. Please look at it.
Are you sure I can't email it to you? I promise. I will just zip it up. You won't even have to open it.
So
it would be nice if you did.
Any parting thoughts? Any advice for people that need to move forward with cleaning up their data, doing some data engineering, some data science?
I'm going to go first, and I'm going to steal one that Cam had talked about yesterday, and that's the cloud. This is definitely a field that the cloud excels at. The tools, the size, everything. The cloud just makes this go and makes it go well. So that's my parting thought. Be in the cloud if you're interested in doing these things. How about you, Cam?
Maybe my parting thought is you can get value from just doing something small to get started. Where it's, remember something my PhD advisor told me. He was the goal with research is you don't need to do something earth-shattering. You just have to do something groundbreaking, which is a very low standard. If you watch the squirrels in your yard, they're breaking lots of ground. Or it's you can do something groundbreaking for your company with very little effort to just get going.
That's awesome that it doesn't take a lot to make an impact.
Those are good answers. I don't think I have anything that great, but stay curious, ask questions. There's a lot of data out there, and if you can find it and start to dig through it, you probably will learn something, and maybe some things you didn't realize. And then go out and aggregate it, bring it in.
Excellent. Well, I have nothing to add to that except thank you for joining us, and I learned a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, Peter learned a lot. We all learned a lot.
Absolutely.
It makes me want to do this internally. I think we've got a lot of data that would be very useful. I think with that, we'll just say goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Solution Design Group is a digital product consultancy in Minneapolis. Check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com or look for us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.